Christmas dinners at my father's house always looked perfect from the outside. The long oak table, the polished china plates, candles placed exactly in the center like something from a magazine. If you walked past the window that night, you would have thought it was the picture of a happy family, but families don't break in photographs. They break in moments. Small ones. The kind people pretend they didn't see. That Christmas, my 10-year-old daughter Lily was holding a painting she had worked on for 2 weeks. She carried it carefully, like it was fragile. Because to her, it was. She had painted everyone in the family sitting together at the same table. Grandpa, Grandma, Aunt Brooke, her cousin Harper, even me, all smiling, all together. She wanted to give it to my father before dinner started. What happened next took less than 10 seconds. Lily walked to the table and sat in an empty chair beside me. My father stood up slowly. "Too calm. That seat is for family?" he said. "She is family," I told him. But he didn't look at me. He looked down at my daughter. "That seat is for my real grandkid." Then he grabbed her sweater. Not violently, not loudly, just one sharp pull. The kind you use when moving something that doesn't belong where it is. Lily slipped sideways off the chair and hit the hardwood floor. The painting fell beside her. 14 people were sitting at that table. 14. No one moved. No one said a word. Lily looked up at me from the floor. "Mummy." I stood up. Not angry. Not yelling. 7 years working as an ER nurse teaches you something about emergencies. You don't panic, you act. I picked my daughter up, took her coat, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I looked back at my father, and I said 4 words. "We are done here." 3 days later, a lawyer knocked on his door. And my father learned something he had never bothered to check. The house he had been living in for 15 years was never his. The cottage behind my father's house was small. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with pipes that complained every winter. But it was where Lily and I lived. Every morning started the same way, the heater ticking along the wall while I poured coffee into a chipped mug. Lily usually woke up a few minutes later, her hair messy, still wrapped in the blanket she dragged around like armor. "Mum." "Yes. Am I really yours forever?" She asked that question a lot. Ever since I adopted her 7 years earlier, I always gave the same answer, forever and always. The truth was, I thought living close to my parents would make things easier for her. Children need family. Grandparents, cousins. At least that's what I told myself. The cottage belonged to my father, or at least that's what I believed. I paid him $1,100 a month to live there. Every payment sent on the first. Zelle transfer. I had every receipt saved on my phone. 84 payments over 7 years. ER nurses document everything, it's habit. When you spend your life writing patient charts, you learn that details matter. I just never imagined those details would matter in my own life. Christmas dinners at my father's house followed the same pattern every year. The table always had a quiet seating order. My father at the head. My mother beside him. My sister Brooke next to them with her daughter Harper. Harper was 8. My father adored her. He told everyone she was brilliant. Special, his little princess. Lily and I usually sat near the kitchen door, where the air draft slipped in whenever someone opened it. I tried not to think about it too much. Families have habits, some fair, some not. But Lily noticed. Children always do. 2 nights before Christmas, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror wearing a red sweater. She smoothed the front carefully. "Mum." "Yes. Can I sit at the big table this year?" Her voice was hopeful, like she was asking for permission to belong. "I'll try," I told her. Looking back now, that was the moment I should have known something was wrong. Because seats at that table were never accidental. Christmas Day arrived cold and gray. Snow falling softly across the yard. Lily held her painting carefully as we walked to the main house. The porch light glowed against the snow. My father opened the door. He looked at Lily, then past her, like she was part of the furniture. But when Harper ran toward him seconds later, everything about him changed. "There's my girl," he said. He lifted Harper easily into a hug. I watched Lily quietly lower the painting in her hands. Inside, the table was already set, 14 plates. Crystal glasses. cloth napkins folded perfectly, and against the back wall, a small folding card table, one plate, one chair. I looked at my mother. Mom, Lily can sit with us, right? She didn't look up from the silverware she was arranging. Don't make this a thing, Dana. So Lily sat at the card table, alone, 10 years old, eating quietly while the rest of the family laughed at the big table. Every few minutes she glanced over, watching, waiting, looking for the moment she could bring her painting forward. She wanted everyone to see it. Wanted my father to see it, because kids believe something simple. If they try hard enough, people will finally notice them. Dinner was halfway finished when Lily stood up. She walked to the big table holding the painting. The empty chair beside me was open. A cousin hadn't arrived, so she sat down. Unrolled the painting across the tablecloth. I made this for everyone, she said softly. The room went silent. My father slowly set down his knife. Then he stood up and walked around the table. What happened next changed everything. When people remember moments that change their lives, they usually describe them as loud, explosive, chaotic. But the moment my family broke apart was quiet. So quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Lily had just unrolled her painting across the tablecloth. Bright colors spread across the white fabric. Little painted figures sitting together at a table. Everyone smiling. Everyone included. She looked around the table nervously, waiting for someone to say something. I made it for Christmas, she said softly. My father stood beside her chair. Not rushed. Not angry, just deliberate. The way he used to move when walking across the bank lobby where he had worked for 30 years. Controlled. Careful, he looked down at the painting, then at Lily, then at the chair she had taken beside me. That seat is for family. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every fork at the table stopped moving. She is family, I said. He didn't look at me. Instead he spoke directly to Lily. That seat is for my real grandkid. The words landed slowly, like something heavy dropping into still water. Lily didn't move at first. Children don't always understand when an adult says something cruel. Sometimes they wait, trying to decide if they misunderstood. I'm part of the family, she said quietly. She wasn't arguing, just stating something she believed was true. My father reached forward. His hand closed around the shoulder of her red sweater. Not violent, not dramatic, just one sharp pull. A quick motion meant to remove something from where it didn't belong. The chair legs scraped across the floor. Then Lily slipped sideways. The sound of her body hitting the hardwood floor was dull and sudden. The painting slid off the table beside her. 14 people were sitting around that table. 14. No one stood up. My mother stared at her plate. Brooke reached for her wine glass. Someone at the far end of the table cleared their throat. 5 seconds passed. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the emergency room. We measure time constantly. Seconds matter. Those 5 seconds told me everything I needed to know about the people sitting around that table. Lily was still on the floor, her eyes wide, not crying yet, just confused. Mommy. Her voice broke on the last syllable. I pushed my chair back slowly, standing up. My movements calm, controlled, the way they become during emergencies. 7 years working in trauma rooms had trained my brain to switch into something steady when chaos appears. You don't shout. You don't panic. You stabilize. I crouched down and slid one arm under Lily's shoulders, the other under her knees. She felt light. Too light. Her hands clutched the sleeve of my sweater as I lifted her. Her body was shaking slightly. I could feel it through the fabric. Then I looked at my father. He was still standing where he had been, his hand half raised, like he hadn't fully decided what expression to make next. The entire table was watching, waiting, expecting something, an argument, a scene, an apology. Instead I spoke quietly, 4 words, "We are done here." Behind me something crashed. Glass against wood. My mother's wine glass had slipped from her hand onto the table. Red wine spread slowly across the white cloth like a dark stain. I picked up Lily's painting from the floor. The corner was bent now. A smear of watercolor across the bottom where it had touched the hardwood. Lily pressed her face against my shoulder, her small hands gripping the back of my coat. I walked to the hallway. grabbed our coats from the closet. No one followed. No one tried to stop us. The front door opened with a soft creak. Cold air rushed in from the falling snow. Outside, the world looked strangely peaceful, like nothing had happened. I carried Lily down the porch steps, snowflakes catching in her hair. In the car, she finally spoke. Did I do something wrong? That question hurt more than the fall. No, I said immediately. You didn't do anything wrong. She nodded slowly and leaned her head against the window. The drive to the cottage took less than a minute, but it felt longer. Like crossing a line that had been invisible before. Inside the cottage, I helped her take off the red sweater. When she turned around, I saw it. A bruise forming along her lower back, darkening already, the shape of the chair leg she had struck when she fell. Instincts took over automatically. I grabbed my phone, took 3 photographs, different angles, clear lighting, timestamp, 7:42 p.m. documentation. Lily watched me quietly. What are you doing? Making a record, I said. Of course she didn't understand that yet. But someday she would. Because records matter. Especially when people start pretending something never happened. Later that night, my phone lit up with messages. One after another. 23 texts before midnight. From my mother. From Brooke. From relatives who hadn't been sitting near enough to see what happened clearly. The messages all said the same thing in different words. You're overreacting. Your father barely touched her. Lily slipped. You ruined Christmas. Not one message asked if Lily was okay. I took screenshots of every single one, saved them in the incident log. Evidence grows quietly, line by line, detail by detail. Around midnight, Lily came into the kitchen wearing her pajamas, her hair still messy from sleep. She stood beside the table while I typed, Mum, yes. Is Grandpa mad because I'm not really his? The question sat in the air between us. Heavy. Unfair. I closed the laptop slowly, then pulled her into my arms. You are really mine, I said. And that's the only thing that matters. She hugged me tightly. Then went back to bed. I stayed at the table until nearly 2 in the morning. Writing, documenting. 7 years of small things I had ignored. Comments, looks, moments where Lily had been treated like she didn't belong. All of it written down. All of it saved. Because something inside me had finally changed that night. For years I believed keeping the peace was the same as protecting my child. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's permission, and I had finally decided something important. I was done asking my father for a seat at his table, if he didn't believe Lily belonged there. Then we would build our own. What I didn't realize yet was that the house where he hosted those dinners wasn't actually his table at all. The morning after Christmas felt quieter than usual. The cottage always made small sounds in the winter, pipes shifting in the walls. The heater clicking every few minutes, wind brushing against the windows. But that morning the silence felt heavier. Lily was still asleep when I woke up. Her bedroom door slightly open, the stuffed bear she'd had since she was 3 tucked under her arm. Children sleep deeply after emotional days. Their bodies reset faster than adults. Adults carry things longer. I moved quietly into the kitchen and poured coffee. The mug warmed my hands while I stared at the screen of my phone. 23 messages, all from the night before, all variations of the same story. My mother, your father barely touched her. Brooke, Lily slipped. I saw it, my Aunt Linda. Richard didn't mean it like that. Someone else. You ruined Christmas. I read every message carefully. Then I took screenshots, saved them in the incident log folder. In the emergency room we document everything, times, observations, exact wording, because memory changes, but records don't. I created a new entry in the document, December 26, 6012 family response following Christmas incident. Then I attached the screenshots, 23 images, 23 small attempts to rewrite what happened. Documentation isn't emotional, it's clinical, neutral. But sometimes the truth inside those records feels heavier than anger. Lily came into the kitchen a few minutes later. Her hair messy. Still wrapped in the blanket she liked to drag around. Morning, she said softly. Morning, kid. She climbed onto the chair beside me. Her eyes drifted to the laptop screen. What are you writing? Just notes. She nodded like that made sense. Then she asked something that made my chest tighten. "Are we going back to Grandpa's today?" "No." The answer came out immediately. "No, we're not." She didn't argue, didn't ask why, she simply stirred her cereal slowly. Kids understand tone better than explanations. At 8:14 a.m. The knocking started. Not a polite knock. A flat palm hitting the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I already knew who it was. My father never called before showing up. He believed the cottage belonged to him. Which meant the door did too. I walked to the door but didn't open it immediately. Instead I looked through the small window. He stood on the porch in his winter coat, jaw tight. The knocking came again. "Dana!" His voice carried through the wood. I opened the door 6 inches, keeping my body between him and the hallway where Lily stood behind me. "You embarrassed me last night," he said immediately. No hello, no concern. "You pushed my daughter," I replied. "I barely touched her. She hit the floor." "That's not what happened." Gaslighting, the word therapists use for rewriting reality. But in the ER we call it something simpler: denial. My father leaned closer. "That girl needs to learn her place." My stomach tightened. "Her name is Lily?" "She's not even blood, Dana." The sentence hung there between us. I didn't argue. Instead I reached into my pocket, opened the voice memo app, and pressed record. He kept talking. "This is my property, my house. You live here because I allow it." 47 seconds. That's how long he spoke before stopping. 47 seconds of statements, ownership claims, insults, control. When he finally paused, I closed the door, locked it. The knocking started again, louder. But I didn't open it. Instead I saved the recording. Timestamp December 26, 8:16 a.m. Another entry in the log. Another piece of evidence. Behind me Lily whispered. "Is Grandpa mad?" "Yes," I said quietly, "but that's not your fault." She nodded slowly, still processing, still trusting me to explain the world. The rest of the morning passed quietly, but my mind kept circling one sentence my father had said. "This is my property, my house." He had said it with absolute certainty, the kind that comes from repeating something for years. And suddenly I realized something strange. I had never actually seen proof of that. 7 years living in the cottage, 84 rent payments, every month sent to my father. But I had never seen a lease, never seen a deed, never asked who legally owned the property. Families run on assumptions. We trust what we're told, until something breaks that trust. Around noon my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Brooke. "Dad says you're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't reply. Instead I opened my banking app, scrolled through the payment history. Zelle transfer after Zelle transfer, $1,100 each month, 7 years, 84 payments. Total, or $92,400. The number stared back at me from the screen. $92,400. Paid to my father. For a property I had never actually verified he owned. The thought settled slowly in my mind, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. In the ER, when symptoms don't match the diagnosis, we investigate, because something hidden is usually underneath. I opened my laptop again. Started searching public property records for our address, 14 Burwood Lane, Connecticut County Database, property ownership records. Then, the information appeared. Owner of record, June A. Whitmore. My grandmother, not Richard Thornton, not my father. I stared at the screen, reading the line again and again. The house my father claimed as his. The house where he hosted Christmas dinner. The house he used to control everyone around him. Didn't belong to him at all. For a long moment I sat there in silence. Then I reached for my phone. Because there was only one person who could confirm what I had just discovered. Grandma June. And if the property record was correct, then the entire story my father had built for 15 years was about to collapse. The assisted living facility sat on the quiet edge of town. Maplewood Senior Living. A long brick building surrounded by bare winter trees. The parking lot was half empty when I arrived. Gray sky overhead. Thin wind moving across the frozen pavement. Places like this always carry a particular smell. Sterile. Disinfectant mixed with something faintly sweet. I noticed it the moment I stepped through the glass doors. Hospitals smell the same. Which made sense. Facilities built to preserve fragile lives tend to feel similar. I checked in at the front desk and followed the hallway toward Grandma June's room. My footsteps echoed softly along the polished floor. She was sitting beside the window when I walked in, wrapped in a pale gray cardigan, reading glasses low on her nose. Her hair thinner than I remembered, but her posture still straight, still sharp. Some people grow old quietly. Grandma June never had. When she looked up and saw me, she closed the book in her lap. Dana. Her voice carried the same steady calm I remembered from childhood. You drove out here in the middle of a snowstorm. Something must be wrong. I sat down in the chair across from her. For a moment I didn't speak. In the ER, when delivering bad news, you pause first. Let the room settle. Let the person across from you prepare for what's coming. Grandma June watched me carefully. Then she spoke again. This is about Christmas, isn't it? I nodded yes. She waited, so I took out my phone, opened the photos. The bruise, 3 images, clear lighting, timestamp visible in the corner. I turned the screen toward her. She leaned forward slowly. Her fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Then she asked one question. Who did that to her? My father? The words felt strange coming out loud, not because they weren't true, because they made something permanent. Grandma June looked up at me. Her eyes had changed. Not soft anymore, sharp, focused. Tell me exactly what happened. So I did. Everything. The card table, the empty chair beside me, the painting Lily brought to dinner. My father standing up. The words he used. That seat is for my real grandkid. The way he pulled her sweater. The sound of Lily hitting the floor. 14 people sitting at that table, doing nothing. When I finished, the room went silent again. Grandma June removed her glasses slowly, placed them on the table beside her. Then she said something very quietly. I trusted him. I didn't answer. Because I understood what she meant. Richard Thornton had always been her reliable son, the banker, the responsible one, the man who handled finances. For years she had allowed him to manage things. Property, paperwork, family arrangements. Now she stared out the window for a long moment, watching the snow fall outside. Then she turned back to me. Dana, I need to ask you something. Okay. Who told you that house belongs to Richard? What do you mean? The house on Burwood Lane? Yes. That house has never belonged to your father. The words landed softly, but they shifted the entire room. I leaned forward. I saw the property record online. She nodded. Good. You never transferred the deed to him? No, her voice remained steady. That house has been in my name since 1987. I sat back in the chair slowly. For years my father had spoken about the house like it was his achievement, his property, his authority. Then why did he say? Because I allowed him to manage it. She folded her hands together. When Richard moved in 15 years ago, he was struggling financially. I didn't know that. Most people didn't. She gave a faint, tired smile. So I told him he could live there. And the cottage. Same property. My mind moved through the numbers automatically. 7 years. 80 for rent payments. $1,100 each month. $2,400. All paid to a man who didn't legally own the property. Grandma June watched my expression carefully. He charged you rent, didn't he? Wes. Her jaw tightened slightly. That wasn't part of the agreement. For the first time since entering the room. Anger appeared in her voice, controlled, but unmistakable. And there's something else, she said. What? She reached slowly toward the small nightstand beside her chair. Opened the drawer. Inside was a thin folder. She pulled out several documents and placed them on the table between us. 5 years ago I created a family trust. For the great-grandchildren. What kind of trust? Education. She tapped the top page gently. Funds set aside for their future. College. Tuition. Whatever they need. My eyes moved across the document. Whitmore Educational Trust. Date established. Trustee listed Richard Thornton. My father. He manages the account, I asked. He was supposed to. She watched my face carefully. But something tells me that hasn't gone well either. I didn't answer immediately, because suddenly several pieces of the puzzle were shifting at once. The house. The trust. The money. Grandma June leaned back slowly in her chair. You know, she said quietly, there's a difference between trusting someone and giving them control. I nodded. And sometimes people confuse the two. Outside, the snow continued falling, soft, endless. The room felt smaller now, heavy with things that had been hidden for years. Finally, she reached back into the drawer. This time she removed something smaller. A single brass key. Old, worn from use. She placed it in my hand. The metal felt cold against my skin. What's this? Safety deposit box. A Hartford Community Bank. I looked at her. Why are you giving this to me? Because, she said calmly, it contains the original trust documents. And the property records. My stomach tightened. And if Richard has been misusing either of those? Her voice didn't rise. But the meaning was clear. For a moment neither of us spoke. The key rested in my palm. Small. Ordinary. But heavy with what it represented. Grandma June reached across the table and gently closed my fingers around it. Dana, she said softly. Yes. You walked away from that table on Christmas. Wes. That was the right decision. She looked directly into my eyes. But what happens next? Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had taught children for 30 years. Is going to change your father's life. The safety deposit box key stayed in my coat pocket the entire drive home. Not because I was afraid of losing it, because I needed to feel it there. Cold metal against fabric, proof that something had shifted. Outside, the late December sky had turned the color of wet concrete. Snow drifted slowly across the road, blurring the edges of houses and fences. When I pulled into the gravel driveway behind the main house, the big colonial building stood exactly the way it always had, large, imposing, confident. The porch light glowed against the falling snow. Inside I could see the dining room window lit up. The long oak table still sat there. Perfectly arranged. The same table where my daughter had been pulled from a chair like she didn't belong. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. The key rested in my hand. Across the yard my father was probably inside the house, moving through his usual routine, believing the world was still arranged exactly the way he preferred. But something about that certainty had already cracked. I could feel it. Inside the cottage, Lily was sitting at the small kitchen table drawing. Her watercolor paints were spread around her like a tiny artist's laboratory. When she saw me come in, she looked up. Did you see great, Grandma June? I did. What did she say? I hung my coat and sat across from her. She said your painting was beautiful. Lily smiled a little. Then returned to the paper in front of her. Butterflies. She had been drawing them a lot lately. I wondered if she liked them because butterflies leave one place behind and become something else. Kids understand transformation better than adults sometimes. That night, after Lily went to bed, I drove to Hartford Community Bank. The branch was small, quiet, the kind of place that still had carpet instead of tile floors. I approached the counter and handed the clerk the key. I need access to a safety deposit box. She checked the number, then disappeared into the back hallway. A few minutes later she returned. Right this way. The vault door was thick steel, heavy. Inside, rows of small metal boxes lined the walls. She slid open the drawer marked with the number on the key. Take your time. Then she stepped out of the room, leaving me alone. I lifted the metal box and placed it on the table. For a moment I just stared at it. Because sometimes opening something changes everything. Then opened the lid. Inside were 3 folders, neatly labeled. Property Deed 14 Burwood Lane, Whitmore Educational Trust. I opened the trust folder first. The document was thick. Formal legal language. Dates, signatures. Grandma June had created the trust in 2016. Its purpose was simple. Education funds for all of her great-grandchildren. The trustee listed on the document was my father, Richard Thornton. Responsible for managing the account, responsible for distributing funds equally, responsible for making sure every child listed as beneficiary was protected. I turned the page. Beneficiaries. Harper Thornton Hayes. Just one name. My eyes moved across the page again. Then again, Lily's name wasn't there. I flipped through the rest of the documents. account summaries, bank records, 14 withdrawals, each labeled educational expense, each tied to Harper. Total amount withdrawn over 5 years, 18,660. I leaned back in the chair slowly. Harper went to public school. Everyone in the family knew that. There was no tuition, no private academy, no expensive school program, which meant those withdrawals were something else entirely. The word appeared quietly in my mind, masseuse. In legal language, Marcus would probably call it something more precise. But the meaning was the same. Money meant for education had been redirected, and Lily had never even been added to the trust. Not because she didn't qualify, because someone chose not to include her. My father. The realization settled slowly. He hadn't just humiliated Lily at Christmas dinner, he had been erasing her for years, quietly, on paper, in bank accounts, in legal records, in every place that actually mattered. I took photographs of the documents with my phone. Every page, every signature, every withdrawal record, documentation, evidence. Nurses document injuries, but sometimes the wounds aren't physical. Sometimes they're financial, institutional, hidden in paperwork. When I finished, I carefully placed the folders back inside the box, locked it, and returned the key to my pocket. The bank lobby was empty when I walked back out. Snow had started falling again, soft and steady. The drive back to the cottage felt longer, heavier, because the story had changed. At first this had been about one moment, one Christmas dinner, one cruel sentence. But now it was something else entirely. Years of quiet decisions, years of rewriting Lily out of the family, years of believing no one would ever notice. When I got home, the cottage was dark except for the small lamp near the couch. Lily was asleep upstairs. I opened my laptop and created a new section inside the incident log, trust documentation. Then I uploaded the photos from the bank, 14 withdrawals, $18,660, 0 records connected to Lily. When I finished, I closed the laptop slowly. Outside the snow continued falling. Across the yard, the lights inside the main house were still on. My father probably believed the worst part of this situation had already passed. That the Christmas incident would fade. That the family would quietly settle back into its usual shape. But the truth about the trust had just changed everything, because humiliation might fade with time, but financial records never do, and somewhere in Hartford, a lawyer named Marcus Webb was about to review documents that would make one thing very clear. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was evidence. In the emergency room, when something goes wrong, we don't argue about it, we document it. Then we escalate. That thought stayed in my mind the next morning as I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The cottage was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes but the damage hasn't been assessed yet. Lily sat across from me eating toast, her feet swinging slowly under the chair. "Are you working?" she asked. "A little." She nodded. Then went back to drawing butterflies on the corner of her notebook. Kids return to normal routines quickly. Adults take longer. Because adults understand what the routine used to mean. At exactly 9:15 a.m. my phone rang. Marcus Webb. I answered immediately. "Dana?" His voice sounded the same as it had in my grandmother's room. Calm. Precise. "I reviewed the documents you sent. The trust records." "Les." I waited. "Lawyers don't rush their conclusions. There are 2 separate issues here," he said. "The property and the trust." "I know. The property is straightforward." He paused. "The house legally belongs to June Whitmore. That part I understand. And Richard Thornton has been collecting rent from you for 7 years." "Yes." "That's approximately $92,000. The number sounded heavier when someone else said it. Marcus continued. "That could be considered unjust enrichment, a legal phrase, polite, clean, but it meant my father had taken money he had no right to collect." "And the trust?" I asked. Another brief pause. "The trust situation is more serious." I leaned forward slightly. "How serious?" "Your father was appointed trustee?" "Yes. That position carries fiduciary responsibility, meaning legal obligation." He spoke slowly. "Trust funds must be used only for the beneficiaries listed. And Lily isn't listed." "No. But the trust language includes all great-grandchildren." which meant Lily should have been included automatically. He had administrative control, Marcus said. He chose not to add her. And the withdrawals. I reviewed the bank statements. I waited again. Dana, there are 14 withdrawals labeled educational expenses. Yes. Total amount $18,660. For Harper. But Harper attends public school. That is correct. The silence between us stretched for a moment. What does that mean legally? I asked. It means your father will need to explain those withdrawals. And if he can't, then the court may remove him as trustee. The word court landed differently than anything else we had discussed. Until now this had felt like family conflict. Private. Contained. Court meant something else entirely. Records. Public consequences. What happens next? I asked. Marcus's answer was simple. We notify him. How? He said. It like it was the most natural step in the world. Which it probably was. To lawyers, not to daughters. By afternoon Marcus arrived at the cottage in person. A dark sedan pulled into the gravel driveway just as the snow began falling again. Lily was upstairs doing homework. I met him at the kitchen table. He placed a thin stack of papers in front of me. 2 documents, formal, precise. The first is a demand for trust accounting. Marcus explained. Your father has 30 days to provide records explaining every withdrawal. And the second, Marcus slid the next page toward me. It was shorter, but heavier. 30-day notice to vacate. I stared at the words for a moment. Even knowing the house wasn't his, seeing it written down made the situation feel real in a different way. He'll explode, I said quietly. Most people do, and after 30 days. If he refuses to leave, we file for eviction. Across the yard the big house stood silent under the gray sky. My father was probably inside, completely unaware that his legal authority had already begun to disappear. When will he receive this? I asked. Tomorrow morning. Marcus pulled a white envelope from his briefcase. Heavy paper. Certified mail stamp already printed in the corner. Delivery requires a signature. Meaning my father would physically acknowledge receiving it. There would be no pretending the letter never arrived. I watched as Marcus sealed the envelope carefully. For a moment the entire future of the situation seemed to sit inside that thin sheet of paper. One document, one signature, one legal notice. After 15 years of my father believing the house was his, that letter would tell him otherwise. Marcus stood up and put on his coat. Before leaving he paused beside the door. There's one more thing, he said. What? Your grandmother amended the trust this morning. How? The sole beneficiary is now Lily. The sentence took a moment to settle. All of it? I asked. The trust, the funds, the future education account, everything. For the first time since Christmas, I felt something shift inside my chest, not anger, not revenge, something quieter. Relief. Marcus opened the cottage door. Cold air drifted inside. Tomorrow morning, he said again. The letter will be delivered. Then he walked down the path toward his car. I stood in the doorway watching the snow fall. Across the yard the big white house looked exactly the same. Same windows. Same porch. Same dining room where Christmas dinner had happened. But something fundamental had changed. Because somewhere between today and tomorrow, my father was about to learn a truth he had ignored for 15 years. The house he believed belonged to him never did. The certified letter arrived the next morning. I didn't see the delivery truck, but I knew exactly when it happened. Because at 1:32 a.m., my phone started vibrating across the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with one name, Richard Thornton, my father. I let it ring. In the emergency room, when someone arrives angry or unstable, the first rule is simple. Don't react immediately. Observe. Assess. My phone rang again, then again. 3 missed calls in less than 2 minutes. A message appeared next. Call me immediately. Another followed. What did you do? I took a screenshot. Saved it in the incident log. Documentation had become automatic now. Every message, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. Across the kitchen table Lily was coloring in her workbook. A purple butterfly this time. She looked up briefly. Who's calling? No one important, I said. That wasn't entirely true, But children don't need to carry adult problems. Not if you can help it. 10 minutes later I heard tires on the gravel path. Then a car door slamming. Heavy footsteps moving quickly toward the cottage. I didn't need to look outside to know who it was. The knock came hard, not polite, not patient. The kind of knock that assumes the door will open immediately. "Dana!" My father's voice came through the wood. "Open the door." Lily looked at me. "Is that Grandpa?" "Wes." "Are you going to let him in?" "No." I walked toward the door and opened it only a few inches. Cold air rushed into the cottage. My father stood on the porch holding a white envelope in his hand. The certified letter. His face was red. Not from the cold, from anger. "What is this?" he demanded. "You read it. You had a lawyer send this to me." "Les." He waved the envelope in the air. "You think you can throw me out of my own house? It's not your house." For a moment he just stared at me. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound. "That's ridiculous. You should speak with Marcus Webb. I'm not calling some ambulance, chasing attorney." His voice rose slightly. "No," I said calmly. "It's documentation." The word irritated him immediately. "You've always been dramatic," he snapped. "You're turning a family misunderstanding into a legal circus. Pulling a 10-year-old child out of a chair isn't a misunderstanding." I barely touched her. She hit the floor. She embarrassed me. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The moment they did, "You embarrassed yourself," I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "You're trying to destroy this family." "No." "You're manipulating your grandmother." "No." He stepped closer to the door. Snowflakes landed on his shoulders. "This is still my property," he said. "I've lived there 15 years. That doesn't make it yours. You're bluffing." For the first time since arriving, he hesitated. Because somewhere inside his mind, a question had finally started forming. Had he ever actually confirmed the ownership himself? Or had he simply assumed everyone would accept what he told them? "You'll regret this," he said finally. "I doubt that." His jaw tightened again. "No." "What then?" I looked directly at him. "It makes Lily safe." That answer stopped him. Not because it convinced him. Because it didn't fit the argument he expected. My father believed everything was about power, control. Winning. Safety wasn't part of his language. For a moment neither of us spoke. The wind moved across the yard, carrying loose snow with it. Behind him the large white house stood quiet still. But its ownership had already begun to change. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I don't think I am. This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It's just starting." His expression hardened again. Then he turned sharply and walked down the porch steps. Halfway across the yard he stopped and looked back. "You destroyed this family," he called out. I didn't respond. Because that sentence had been said many times before, usually when someone finally refuses to tolerate bad behavior. My father walked back toward the house. The front door slammed behind him a moment later. The cottage became quiet again. The heater hummed softly along the wall. Lily came to stand beside me. "Was Grandpa mad?" "Yes." "Did you do something wrong?" I knelt down so we were eye level. "No." "Then why is he mad?" "Because people who lose control often confuse that feeling with injustice." But explaining that to a 10-year-old isn't simple, so I chose something easier. Sometimes adults don't like hearing the truth. She thought about that. "Okay?" Kids accept things adults spend years arguing about. After Lily returned to the table, I opened my laptop. Another entry in the incident log, January 2 on Hive 4:07 a.m. Richard Thornton arrived at cottage after receiving certified notice. I wrote down everything. Exact phrases, exact time, exact tone, documentation, because something important had become clear during that conversation. My father had argued about pride, about control, about embarrassment, but he never denied the documents. He never claimed the trust was legitimate. He never said the property record was wrong. Instead, he had focused on one thing: authority. Which meant somewhere inside him, the realization had already begun. The foundation he had built his entire life on, the house, the trust, the image of control, was starting to crack. And once cracks appear in a foundation, the collapse usually follows. Families rarely fall apart in one moment, they fracture, quiet cracks first. Then the pressure builds, and eventually something gives way. The first crack appeared 3 days after the certified letter arrived. I was halfway through a 12-hour shift at the hospital when my phone buzzed in the locker room. Break time, 9:18 p.m. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly while I opened the message. Brooke. My sister. We need to talk. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then another message. Dad says you're trying to steal the house. I leaned back against the metal locker door. Hospitals teach you something about crisis. When people panic, they grab the explanation that protects their version of reality. Brooke had already chosen hers. I'm not stealing anything, I typed. Her reply came seconds later. You're manipulating Grandma. I stared at the screen, then typed again. The house was never Dad's. Several seconds passed. The typing bubble appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Finally her answer came. That's not true. I took a screenshot, saved it. Documentation. Because denial always comes first. The second crack appeared the next afternoon. I was helping Lily with math homework at the kitchen table when my phone rang. The name surprised me. Aunt Linda. She rarely called. When I answered, Dana? Yes? I need to ask you something. Okay. Is it true Richard received a legal notice? Wes. Silence on the other end of the phone. Then she spoke again. He told everyone you're trying to throw him out of his own home. That's not his home. Another pause. Dana, that's not what he said. Of course it wasn't, because my father had spent years controlling the family narrative. In his version of events, he was always the victim, the responsible one, the misunderstood one. I can send you the property record, I said. But instead of doing that, I opened the voice memo app, scrolled to the file from the morning after Christmas. 47 seconds. My father's voice outside the cottage door. This is my property. That girl isn't blood. I pressed send. The audio file delivered instantly. 40 Then Linda's voice returned, quieter now. Oh. Just that. One word. But sometimes one word changes everything. Oh. The crack widened. Across the yard, things were already beginning to collapse. I knew because the house had grown strangely quiet. My father stopped taking his morning walks. Stopped standing on the porch during phone calls. Stopped waving to the neighbors. For someone who cared deeply about appearances, that kind of silence meant something was wrong. Then Friday night happened. The explosion. It started with headlights sweeping across the cottage window. Brooke's car. The tires crunched across the snow-covered driveway as she parked near the main house. I glanced at the clock. 8:52 p.m. Lily was already asleep upstairs. A moment later the front door of the big house slammed open. Voices spilled into the cold night air. Angry ones. You told me everything was fine. Brooke's voice, sharp, loud. I said it was under control. My father shouted back, under control. Her voice echoed across the yard. $18,000, Dad! The number carried clearly through the night air. Trust money. Silence followed. Then the shouting started again. My mother's voice joined the argument, trying to calm things down. Which rarely works when people are already panicking, because money has a way of exposing truth faster than anything else. Inside the cottage, I stood near the window watching the lights inside the main house flicker on room by room. Kitchen, living room, dining room. The same rooms where Christmas dinner had taken place. The same rooms where Lily had been told she didn't belong. Now those rooms held something else, fear. After nearly 20 minutes the front door burst open again. Brooke stormed outside, her heels crunching across the frozen driveway. She stopped near the bottom of the porch steps and turned back toward the house. You said there was no risk. My father appeared in the doorway. Get back inside, he said. No. You're making a scene. You already made one. The porch light cast long shadows across the snow. For years my father had controlled every conversation in that house. But control depends on confidence. And confidence disappears quickly when lawyers become involved. Brooke shook her head. You told me Dana had no proof. Another long silence. Then my father spoke again, but this time quieter, too quiet for me to hear clearly. Brooke didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and walked back to her car. Her headlights swept across the cottage windows as she pulled away. A few minutes later, the lights inside the main house turned off one by one. The property returned to silence. I stayed by the window for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. Upstairs, Lily shifted in her sleep. The family structure my father had built for years was starting to collapse. Not because I attacked it, because the truth had finally entered the room, and truth does something powerful inside families built on control. It forces people to choose sides. Some people double down on denial. Others start asking questions. But the illusion never survives intact. Across the yard, the dining room light finally went dark. The house stood silent under the falling snow. And for the first time since Christmas, I realized something important. The real collapse hadn't happened yet. Tonight was only the beginning. Because arguments inside houses stay private, but courtrooms don't, and the next step in this story wasn't another family fight. It was evidence. January ended quietly. Winter in Connecticut has a way of flattening everything. Snow piles along the edges of the road. Trees stand bare and patient. The sky stays gray for days at a time. Life slows down, but legal processes don't. The 30-day notice Marcus sent had almost expired. My father knew it. I knew it. And somewhere inside the big White House across the yard, the tension had been building like pressure inside a sealed container. By the final week of January, things had changed noticeably. The porch lights stayed off. Curtains were drawn during the day. Even the mailbox remained untouched for days at a time. Avoidance. A common reaction when someone realizes the facts are no longer in their favor. In the emergency room, we see something similar with patients who delay treatment. Ignore the symptoms long enough, and maybe the problem will disappear. But problems that involve paperwork rarely disappear. They mature. They escalate. And eventually they arrive at your door. The moving truck came on a Thursday morning. White, plain, no company logo. 2 men stepped out wearing thick winter jackets and work gloves. I saw them through the kitchen window while pouring coffee. Lily stood beside me, still half asleep. "Mum?" "Yes." "What's that truck for?" I watched the movers walk toward the front door of the main house. "Someone's moving." She tilted her head slightly. "Grandpa?" "Yes." Her eyes stayed on the window for a moment. Then she simply nodded. Kids process things differently. They don't carry the same emotional weight adults attach to history. For Lily, the house across the yard had always felt uncomfortable. Leaving it behind didn't feel like loss. It felt like distance. The front door of the house opened. My father stood there. Even from across the yard, I could see the stiffness in his posture. Shoulders tight, arms folded across his chest. He spoke with the movers for a moment. Sharp gestures. Eventually they stepped inside. The first boxes came out a few minutes later. Books. Kitchen supplies. A lamp from the living room. Small pieces of furniture carried carefully down the porch steps. The scene looked strangely ordinary, which felt almost surreal. For 15 years that house had been the center of my father's authority. Family gatherings, holiday dinners, long lectures about responsibility and respect. Now 2 strangers were quietly carrying his life into the back of a moving truck. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just the slow dismantling of an illusion. Around mid-morning the front door opened again. My father stepped outside. He stood on the porch for a long moment, looking across the yard toward the cottage. Then he started walking, each step slow, deliberate. Snow crunched beneath his shoes. When he reached the cottage door, he knocked once, not aggressively, just a single knock. I opened the door. Cold air moved between of us, spoke at first. Then he glanced past me into the kitchen. "Is she here?" "Upstairs." He nodded. "That's good." His voice sounded different now, still controlled, but tired. "You're proud of yourself," he said. It wasn't really a question. "No, you humiliated me." "No," I replied quietly. "You did that yourself." His jaw tightened slightly. "You think this ends things?" "I think it already did." For a moment he looked past me again toward the kitchen window, where Lily had been standing earlier that morning. He said, "Yes. They move on. Sometimes. The silence stretched between us. Wind drifted across the yard behind him. Cold and steady. "You destroyed this family," he said finally. I had heard that sentence before. It appears often when someone finally refuses to tolerate certain behavior. "No," I said calmly. "That happened long before Christmas." His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he looked back toward the house. The movers were carrying the last pieces of furniture into the truck. For a brief moment something flickered across his face. Not anger, not pride, something closer to realization. Authority can disappear quietly when the foundation underneath it was never real. "You think the house will make you happy?" he asked. "It's not about the house." "Then what?" I held the door frame with one hand. "Respect." He didn't respond. Because respect had never been something he associated with children, or adopted grandchildren, or daughters who refused to obey. Finally he turned, walked back across the yard. The moving truck doors slammed shut a few minutes later. The engine started. Slowly the truck pulled away down the narrow street. Carrying 15 years of my father's certainty with it, I closed the cottage door, locked it. Inside, the heater hummed softly along the wall. Upstairs, Lily's footsteps moved across the hallway, getting ready for the day outside. The large white house stood quiet, empty now. For the first time in 15 years, my father no longer lived there. And the table where Lily had been told she didn't belong was finally ours. Spring came slowly that year. Connecticut winters don't end suddenly. They loosen their grip a little at a time. Snow fades into gray patches along the roadside. The air softens. Trees begin remembering what green feels like. By late March, the backyard looked different. Not because the house had changed. Because the tension around it had finally disappeared. For the first few weeks after my father moved out, Lily and I stayed in the cottage. Not because we had to. Because we needed space. The big white house across the yard still carried too many memories. Rooms where silence had replaced kindness. A dining table where belonging had once been measured by blood. But empty houses eventually become neutral again. Walls forget. Rooms reset. And one quiet Saturday morning in April, Lily stood beside the kitchen window with her cereal bowl and asked a question. "Mum." "Yes." "When are we moving into the big house?" I looked out across the yard. The colonial windows reflected the pale morning sunlight. For years that house had felt like my father's territory. Somewhere I navigated carefully. Now the deed sat inside a folder on my desk. Legally transferred. Official. Dana Thornton, owner. I still wasn't used to seeing my name there. "Soon," I told her. Lily nodded thoughtfully, then looked out the window again. "That house is big." "It is." "Do we have to sit at a special table there?" The question carried more meaning than she probably realized. I crouched beside her chair. "No," I said gently. "In our house everyone sits together." She seemed satisfied with that answer. Kids don't care about square footage or property value. They care about where they're allowed to sit. Moving day wasn't dramatic. No speeches. No grand moment, just boxes. Books, clothes, Lily's art supplies, the same watercolor set she had brought to Christmas dinner months earlier. We carried everything across the yard one piece at a time. The front door of the big house opened with a quiet creak. Inside, the rooms felt unfamiliar. Empty but lighter. The dining room table still stood in the center of the room. Polished wood, 14 chairs around it. I walked past it slowly, then stopped. For a moment I considered moving the entire thing out of the house, replacing it, starting fresh. But Lily ran in behind me before I could decide. "Mom." Her voice echoed through the hallway. "Yes." She pointed toward the table. "We should keep it." "Why?" "So everyone can sit together." The simplicity of that logic settled the question instantly. Kids understand symbolism better than adults sometimes. The table hadn't been the problem. The rules around it had. Grandma June visited 2 weeks later. Marcus drove her over from the assisted living facility. She walked slowly through the front door, leaning lightly on her cane. Her eyes moved around the living room, taking in the quiet, the sunlight, the absence of tension. "You've done well," she said softly. "I didn't do much. You protected your child." She sat down at the kitchen table while Lily showed her drawings. Butterflies again. dozens of them across the page. Grandma June studied the picture carefully. "She likes things that change," she said. "That's good." Change had arrived quietly for our family. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, one decision at a time. Life settled into a new rhythm. Lily continued seeing Dr. Singh every 2 weeks. The therapy helped, not overnight, but slowly. One afternoon, Dr. Singh shared something Lily had said during a session. "She told me something interesting," the therapist said. "What?" "She said she finally feels like the house belongs to her." I thought about that sentence all evening. Because ownership means different things to children. It doesn't come from legal paperwork. It comes from safety. And safety had finally replaced tension inside those walls. One evening in early June, Lily and I were cooking dinner together. The kitchen windows were open, warm air drifting inside. She stirred pasta carefully while I chopped vegetables beside her. After a few minutes she looked up. "Mum." "Yes. Am I really yours forever?" She had asked that question many times over the years. But something about the way she said it now felt different. Not worried, not uncertain, just curious. I wiped my hands and crouched beside her. "You're mine," I said, "and I'm yours." She nodded slowly, then smiled. A real smile. The kind that reaches a child's eyes. Later that night I walked past her bedroom. The door was open. Inside, Lily had hung a new painting on the wall. Another family picture. But this one looked different. The table was still there, but the people around it had changed. Grandma June Marcus, Dr. Singh. People who showed up when things mattered. People who helped rebuild something healthier. I stood there quietly for a long time, listening to Lily breathing softly in her sleep. The house felt peaceful. Not because it was large. Not because it was ours. Because it was safe. For years I believed family meant staying at someone else's table, trying to prove you deserved a seat, trying to earn belonging. But Lily had taught me something simpler. Family isn't the people who decide whether you deserve a chair. Family is the people who would never take your seat away. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do for your child is stand up, walk away from the table, and build a better one.